Hey guys, tonight we begin with stone, stench and survival. We're stepping through the portcullis into the supposedly magnificent world of medieval castles, where life was a delicate balance between dodging arrows and dodging dysentery. Forget the fairy tales and Disney movies Hollywood sold you. There are no singing princesses here, no romantic balconies, and definitely no plumbing. Tonight you're not visiting Cinderella's castle. You're trapped in a stone fortress where the walls literally weep with moisture. The floors are covered in things you'd rather not identify, and your main concern isn't finding true love, it's finding clean water. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. So you've somehow found yourself living in a medieval castle. Congratulations! You've won the lottery of location, assuming the lottery was designed by someone with a deep hatred for human comfort and a profound love of architectural suffering. Let's start with where you sleep, because that's optimistic of you to assume you'll get much rest. You're lying on what passes for a bed in the year 1300, which is essentially a wooden frame with rope mesh stretched across it. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of a hammock, except instead of swaying gently in tropical breezes, you're suspended over stone floors in a room that's colder than a morgue and about as welcoming. Your mattress, and I use that term very loosely, is a cloth sack stuffed with straw. That's it. No memory foam, no pillows, and definitely no Egyptian cotton sheets. The straw inside your mattress is probably the same straw that was on the floor yesterday, swept up after the horses, dogs, and various other creatures finished doing what creatures do on floors. It's been repurposed for your sleeping pleasure. Recycling at its finest. The blanket covering you weighs roughly as much as a small cow and has the texture of tree bark. It's made from wool that's been woven with all the softness of medieval mercy, which is to say, none whatsoever. It scratches against your skin like you're being gently hugged by a hedge. Your skin hates you, and it's only been 5 minutes since you lay down. But here's the real treat. You're not sleeping alone. Privacy? What's that? You're sharing this charming stone chamber with anywhere from 5 to 20 other people, depending on your station in the castle hierarchy. If you're lucky enough to be a lord or lady, you might only have 3 or 4 servants sleeping in your room. If you're a servant yourself, congratulations, you get to share space with the entire household staff, plus whatever livestock has wandered inside to escape the weather. The person next to you is snoring like a wounded bear. The person beyond them is coughing up what sounds like their internal organs. And someone across the room is having a very vivid dream about either combat or indigestion. You can't tell which, but they're making concerning noises. The air is thick with the fragrant symphony of unwashed bodies, wet wool, and that special medieval blend of smoke, mould, and despair. You shift on your straw mattress, and it crinkles like autumn leaves. The rope beneath you creaks ominously. Your spine cracks like an old wooden door, and you realise you're only 3 hours into what passes for night in this place. The darkness isn't the peaceful darkness of modern bedrooms. It's the complete, absolute darkness of a world without electric lights, punctuated only by the occasional flicker of a dying torch in the hallway. Sleep tight, or try to. The stones around you are already plotting tomorrow's discomfort. You've managed to survive the night, somehow. The sun is creeping through the narrow window slits, generously called windows, though they're more like decorative arrow holes. And it's time to begin your daily routine of medieval castle living. Which is to say, it's time to discover new and creative ways to be miserable. First, let's talk about your morning wash. You stumble to the wash basin, which is a wooden bowl that looks like it was carved by someone who had only heard descriptions of what a bowl should be. The water inside is cold, not cool, not refreshing, cold. the kind of cold that makes your teeth ache just looking at it. This same water has been used by everyone who woke up before you, which means it's now a delightful soup of other people's dirt, dead skin cells, and whatever else medieval people accumulated overnight. There's no soap. Let that sink in. The thing that modern people use without thinking, that basic necessity for feeling human, it doesn't exist in your world. Instead, you get to splash around in communal cold water and hope for the best. You're essentially baptizing yourself in other people's filth every morning. The smell that follows you after this cleaning ritual is not improvement, it's redistribution. Your teeth are their own special adventure. There's no toothbrush, no toothpaste, no mouthwash, no floss. You get to chew on a stick. A stick. Think about that the next time you complain about your dentist. You're literally gnawing on wood like a beaver, hoping to dislodge whatever feast remnants decided to take up permanent residence in your mouth. Your breath could knock out a horse, and your gums are probably bleeding from your aggressive stick-chewing routine. Now for the bathroom situation. Oh, you sweet, naive person. You're looking for a bathroom? How delightfully modern of you. What you get instead is a garderobe, a fancy name for a hole in the wall that drops straight down to the moat or the castle's base. It's literally a toilet that's just a hole with a stone seat. No privacy, no door, just you and your business, hanging over what's essentially a very deep, very smelly pit. The toilet paper is whatever cloth you can spare, and spare is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Most of the time, it's hay, leaves, or your own clothing. You're essentially wiping yourself with whatever nature provides, which, in medieval times, was not much and definitely not soft. The whole experience is like playing Russian roulette with your personal hygiene. And here's the bonus. Everyone in the castle uses the same garderobe, the same hole, the same stone seat, the same complete lack of anything resembling sanitation. It's like the world's worst timeshare arrangement, except instead of sharing a vacation condo, you're sharing a communal waste disposal system. The smell rising from below is biblical. It's the kind of smell that has its own presence in the room, that makes your eyes water and your soul question its life choices. You're literally sitting above a medieval septic system that's been collecting the contributions of hundreds of people for months, possibly years. But wait, there's more. In winter, that hole becomes a wind tunnel. Arctic air shoots up through your personal waste disposal system, turning your bathroom break into an endurance test against hypothermia. You're getting frostbite in places that should never experience frostbite, all while trying to maintain some semblance of dignity. You finish your morning routine feeling less clean than when you started, which is quite an achievement. Your teeth hurt, your skin is still dirty, and you smell like a combination of stale water and communal suffering. It's barely sunrise, and you've already lost 3 battles against basic human dignity. Welcome to castle life. It's going to be a long day. Now that you've completed your morning ritual of aggressive personal hygiene failure, it's time for breakfast. And by breakfast, I mean the meal that will teach you why medieval people had such short life expectancies and such grim expressions in their portraits. You make your way to the Great Hall, which sounds impressive until you realise it's just a large stone room with all the warmth and charm of a refrigerated warehouse. The floors are covered with rushes, that's reeds and herbs scattered around to supposedly freshen the air and provide cushioning. In reality, these rushes are a delightful cocktail of rotting vegetation, spilled food, animal droppings, and whatever else has fallen to the floor over the past several weeks. The fresh rushes are changed maybe once a month, if you're lucky. Until then, you're walking on a medieval carpet that's basically composting under your feet. Every step releases a little puff of organic decomposition into the air. It's like walking through a swamp that someone decided to put a roof over. Your breakfast consists of bread and ale, not toast and orange juice, not cereal and milk, not even porridge if you're lucky. Just bread and ale. The bread is dark, dense, and has the texture of wood that's been soaked in disappointment It's made from whatever grain the castle managed to grow, grind, and not lose to rats, which means it's gritty, sour, and probably contains things that weren't originally supposed to be in bread. This isn't the soft, fluffy bread of modern bakeries. This is bread that doubles as a weapon. You could build a wall with these loaves. They're so hard that eating them is essentially a form of medieval dental torture. You're not so much eating breakfast as you are slowly chiseling away at an edible brick with your teeth. The ale is warm, flat, and tastes like it was made by someone who had only heard descriptions of what ale should taste like. But here's the thing. You drink it anyway because it's safer than the water. The water will kill you with dysentery, typhoid, or any number of waterborne diseases that medieval people didn't understand but definitely experienced. The ale might taste like fermented sadness, but at least it won't give you medieval plague. Want some meat or cheese? Dream on. Unless it's a feast day, or you're important enough to warrant actual nutrition, you get bread and ale. Maybe, if you're incredibly fortunate, you'll get some pottage, a thin gruel made from whatever vegetables are available, boiled into a substance that has the consistency of wallpaper paste and roughly the same nutritional value. The dining situation is its own adventure. You're sitting at a wooden table that's been carved and recarved so many times, it looks like abstract art. The surface is scarred with knife marks, stained with spills from decades of meals, and probably home to several species of bacteria that science won't discover for another 600 years. Your eating utensils are a knife and your hands. That's it. No fork, no spoon, no napkin. You're eating like a civilized caveman, sawing at your bread brick with a knife that's duller than medieval entertainment and using your fingers for everything else. Your hands, which you washed in that communal water bowl, are now your primary eating implements. The person next to you is eating with the same enthusiasm as someone facing execution. They're methodically working through their bread, pausing occasionally to take a swig of ale that makes them wince. Across the table, someone is trying to soften their bread by dipping it in their ale, creating a soggy mess that looks like it belongs in a medieval horror story. The smell in the hall is a competition between the decomposing rushes on the floor, the unwashed bodies around the table, and the general aroma of food that's been prepared without any concept of food safety. It's like eating in a barn, except barns are usually better ventilated. You chew your way through breakfast, each bite a small victory against starvation, and a larger defeat against your expectations of what food should be. Your jaw aches from the effort, your teeth are probably loose from the abuse, and you're already looking forward to the exact same meal tomorrow morning. This is the most important meal of your day, and it's teaching you why medieval people were so eager to go to war. After breakfast like this, charging into battle with a sword starts to look like a reasonable career choice. Breakfast is over, which means it's time for the main event, work. And by work, I mean the kind of labour that would make modern people immediately call their union representatives, and possibly the United Nations Human Rights Council. If you're a servant, and statistically, you probably are, your day begins with what euphemistically called castle maintenance. This means you're responsible for keeping a massive stone fortress running smoothly, using technology that peaked with the invention of the wheel, an enthusiasm that's been steadily declining since you realised what your job actually entails. Let's start with the stables, because someone has to take care of the horses, and that someone is you. You're shoveling manure that's been accumulating since the last time someone shoveled manure, which might have been yesterday or might have been last week, depending on how much the castle values cleanliness versus getting other things done. The horses are large, smelly, and have opinions about your presence in their space. They express these opinions through strategic kicking, biting, and producing fresh manure just as you finish cleaning up the old manure. It's like playing the world's worst game of whack-a-mole, except instead of moles, you're dealing with horse waste, and instead of winning prizes, you get to do it again tomorrow. The smell in the stables is beyond description. It's a concentrated essence of animal, mixed with hay that's been marinating in urine for months, seasoned with the general mustiness of a building that's never been properly cleaned. You're breathing in particles of things you'd rather not think about, and your clothing is absorbing odours that will follow you for the rest of your natural life. But wait, there's more. The horses need grooming, which means you're getting up close and personal with creatures that haven't discovered the concept of personal hygiene. You're brushing out tangles that contain everything from mud to burrs to things that used to be alive. The horses tolerate this attention with the patience of creatures who know they're more valuable than you are. If you're working in the kitchens, congratulations. You've won the lottery of medieval employment opportunities. You get to spend your day in a room that's heated by open fires, filled with smoke that would make a chimney jealous, and populated by people who are wielding knives and operating on very little sleep. The kitchen is a medieval version of hell, complete with flames, smoke, and the constant threat of injury. You're working with fire that's completely uncontrolled, using pots that weigh more than you do, and handling food that's been sitting in storage conditions that would horrify modern health inspectors. Everything you touch is either scalding hot or potentially contaminated, and sometimes both. Your job involves hauling water from the well, which is a hole in the ground that may or may not be connected to the same water system that serves the garderobe. You're carrying heavy buckets up stone stairs that were designed by people who apparently never had to carry anything themselves. Your back is permanently curved from the constant lifting, and your arms feel like they're being slowly pulled from their sockets. The cooking itself is done over open flames, which means you're constantly dodging sparks, smoke, and the occasional flare-up that tries to remove your eyebrows. You're stirring massive pots of stew that contain whatever meat could be found, whatever vegetables haven't rotted, and whatever herbs might disguise the taste of ingredients that are well past their prime. If you're assigned to cleaning duty, you're essentially fighting a losing battle against entropy itself. You're scrubbing floors with water that's barely cleaner than the floors themselves, using brushes that are falling apart, and dealing with stains that have achieved a kind of permanence that borders on the architectural. The walls weep with moisture, creating a constant battle against mould, mildew, and the general dampness that pervades everything in the castle. You're not so much cleaning as you are temporarily redistributing the dirt and hoping no one notices. The stone floors are perpetually slick with moisture, making every step a potential trip to the medieval emergency room, which is to say, a trip to the grave. Your workday lasts from sunrise to sunset, which in medieval terms means from when you can see your hand in front of your face to when you definitely can't see your hand in front of your face. There are no breaks, no lunch hours, no weekend. You work until the work is done, and the work is never done. By midday, you're exhausted, dirty, and smelling like a combination of whatever job you've been assigned and whatever personal hygiene failures you've accumulated. Your hands are raw from the work, your back aches from the lifting, and you're already dreading tomorrow's identical routine. This is your career. This is your life. This is why medieval people had such short life expectancies and such grim expressions in their artwork. They weren't posing for portraits. They were documenting their slow descent into occupational despair. By the time the sun reaches its highest point, which you can barely see from inside your stone prison, it's time for your midday meal. And by meal, I mean the culinary experience that will make you nostalgic for this morning's breakfast, which is saying something. You've worked for 6 hours straight, doing manual labour that would make modern fitness instructors weep with sympathy. Your body's screaming for nutrition, hydration, and possibly medical attention. What you get instead is more bread and ale, with the exciting addition of whatever soup-like substance the kitchen managed to produce from ingredients that were questionable to begin with. The bread is the same as this morning, dense, dark, and aggressive. It's like eating construction materials, except construction materials might have more nutritional value. You're sawing away at it with a knife that's duller than your prospects, for social mobility, trying to create pieces small enough to fit in your mouth without causing internal injury. The soup is what charitably might be called vegetable broth, though the vegetables in question gave up their will to live sometime last week. It's a thin, brownish liquid that tastes like it was made by boiling water with the memory of food. The vegetables floating in it have achieved a state of decomposition that's almost philosophical. They're neither solid nor liquid, but something in between that defies natural law. You're eating this with a wooden spoon that's been carved by someone who had only heard descriptions of what spoons should be. It's more like a small shovel, and about as effective at transferring liquid from bowl to mouth. Most of your soup ends up decorating your clothing, which is actually an improvement because it adds some colour to the brown-grey ensemble that passes for medieval fashion. The ale is warm, flat, and tastes like it was brewed by someone who was having a personal crisis during the fermentation process. But you drink it anyway, because it's wet and it's safer than the water. And at this point in your day, those are the only qualifications that matter. The dining situation hasn't improved since breakfast. You're still sitting at the same scarred wooden table, surrounded by the same collection of unwashed humanity, breathing the same air that's thick with the aroma of decomposing rushes and collective exhaustion. The person next to you is chewing with the enthusiasm of someone facing their execution, and you're starting to understand why. The conversation around the table is limited to grunts, sighs, and the occasional comment about the weather, which is always either too hot, too cold, or too wet. Medieval people didn't have much to talk about, mainly because their lives consisted of work, eating, sleeping, and trying not to die from any of the 17 diseases that were constantly circulating through the castle. You're eating quickly, not because the food is good, but because the sooner you finish, the sooner you can return to work, which is somehow preferable to prolonging this dining experience. The bread is making your jaw ache, the soup is making your stomach question its life choices, and the ale is making you wonder if fermentation is just a fancy word for controlled rot. After 20 minutes of aggressive eating, you've consumed enough nutrition to potentially survive until evening, assuming your body doesn't reject the entire meal in protest. You're not satisfied. Satisfaction isn't a concept that applies to medieval dining, but you're functional, which is the best you can hope for. You leave the table feeling like you've completed a challenge rather than enjoyed a meal. Your teeth hurt, your stomach is confused, and you're already dreading the evening meal, which will be exactly the same as this one, which was exactly the same as breakfast. This is lunch in paradise. It's a daily reminder that survival is more important than pleasure, and that medieval people had their priorities straight, even if those priorities were grim, practical, and completely devoid of joy. The afternoon brings its own special challenges, and if you're unlucky enough to get injured, sick, or just generally unwell during your day of medieval labour, you're about to discover why the average life expectancy in castle times was roughly the same as a modern house cat. Let's say you've managed to cut yourself while working. Maybe the dull knife slipped while you were attacking your bread, or perhaps you scraped against one of the many sharp stone edges that populate every surface in the castle. In modern times, you'd clean the wound, apply antiseptic, and put on a bandage. In medieval times, you get to experience what people optimistically call medicine. The castle's medical professional is either a monk who learned healing by reading books written by people who had never seen a human body, or a barber who figured that if he could cut hair, he could probably cut other things too. These are your options: religious theory or beauty-based guesswork. Your wound is cleaned with water that's approximately as sanitary as the water you washed with this morning, which is to say, not at all. The cleaning process involves splashing questionable liquid on an open cut and hoping for the best. It's like playing medical roulette, except all the chambers are loaded with infection. The bandage is a piece of cloth that's been used for various purposes around the castle, none of which involved sterile medical applications. It's been torn from someone's clothing, which means it's already contaminated with whatever that person has been doing, wearing, and sweating into. You're essentially wrapping your wound in someone else's laundry. But here's where it gets interesting. Medieval medicine operates on the theory of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to this system, all illness is caused by an imbalance of these four substances in your body. The solution to any medical problem is to rebalance your humours, which usually involves removing some of them. If you're feeling unwell, the treatment is bloodletting. This involves either cutting you open to let blood drain out, or applying leeches to suck blood from your body. You're literally being drained like a medieval oil change, based on the medical theory that you have too much blood, and that's what's making you sick. The tools used for bloodletting are knives that have been sharpened on whatever stone was available, sterilised by the hope that fire might kill whatever was living on the blade, and wielded by people whose medical training consisted of watching someone else do it once. You're being operated on by the medieval equivalent of a YouTube tutorial enthusiast. If bloodletting doesn't work, the next step is purging, making you vomit and have diarrhea simultaneously to clear out the bad humours. This is accomplished by giving you substances that are basically medieval poison, designed to make your body reject everything it contains. You're being systematically emptied from both ends, which is apparently what medieval people considered therapeutic. The leeches deserve special mention. These are slugs that have been collected from stagnant water, chosen for their enthusiasm for sucking blood, and applied to your body like living bandages. You're lying still while creatures that look like tiny black sausages attach themselves to your skin and drink your blood. It's like being a voluntary blood bank for swamp creatures. The medical facility itself is a room in the castle that smells like a combination of herbs, blood, and the general mustiness of a place where people come to suffer professionally. The floors are stained with substances you'd rather not identify, and the walls are decorated with medical instruments that look like they were designed by someone with a deep hatred for human comfort. Your treatment might also include trepanation, drilling holes in your skull to let out evil spirits, because clearly, if you have a headache, the logical solution is to bore holes in your head with medieval power tools. The drill is operated by hand, the anaesthetic is alcohol, and the success rate is whatever it is. If you survive your medical treatment, you're released back into the castle population to continue your daily routine of manual labour and nutritional disappointment. If you don't survive, well, that's just medieval medicine working as intended. The treatment might not cure you, but it will definitely end your suffering, one way or another. The afternoon medical adventure is a reminder that, in medieval times, getting sick was often a death sentence, and getting medical treatment was often a faster death sentence. It's no wonder that medieval people turned to prayer so frequently. When your healthcare system is based on bloodletting and demon hole drilling, divine intervention starts to look like a reasonable insurance policy. As the sun begins its descent toward the horizon, not that you can see much of it from inside your stone fortress, the workday officially ends, and it's time for evening entertainment. And by entertainment, I mean the kind of social activities that would make modern people immediately request a transfer to a different century. The Great Hall transforms from dining room to social centre, which means the same room where you ate your disappointing meals now becomes the venue for your disappointing leisure time. The rushes on the floor are even more aromatic now, having been marinated in a full day's worth of spills, footprints, and general human activity. If you're lucky, tonight features a travelling minstrel, a person who has made the career choice to wander from castle to castle, carrying a lute and a collection of songs that were already old when your grandfather was young. The minstrel's repertoire consists of epic ballads about heroes who died gloriously in battles that probably never happened, love songs about relationships that definitely never happened, and drinking songs that are depressingly accurate about the quality of medieval ale. The minstrel performs standing in the centre of the hall, surrounded by people who are sitting on benches or on the floor, depending on their social status. The acoustics in the stone hall are such that every note echoes off the walls, creating a reverb effect that makes the music sound like it's being performed in a cave, which essentially it is. The lute is held together with prayers, and possibly some medieval version of duct tape. It's been repaired so many times that it's more repair than original instrument. The strings are made from animal gut, which means they smell like the inside of something that used to be alive, and they go out of tune with the enthusiasm of medieval attention spans. But here's the thing about medieval entertainment. It's not really about the quality of the performance. It's about having something, anything, to distract from the fact that your life is a daily endurance test against discomfort, disease, and disappointment. The minstrel could be playing a wooden spoon, and people would still listen because the alternative is sitting in silence, contemplating their mortality. If there's no minstrel, the evening entertainment might consist of storytelling. Someone with a good memory and a flair for dramatic exaggeration will recount tales of adventure, romance, and heroism that bear no resemblance to actual medieval life. These stories feature knights who are brave instead of desperate, princesses who are beautiful instead of malnourished, and adventures that end happily instead of with dysentery. The storyteller performs by firelight, which creates dramatic shadows on the walls and makes everyone's face look like they're auditioning for a medieval horror movie. The fire provides the only light in the hall, which means the storyteller's face is illuminated while everyone else sits in darkness, creating an atmosphere that's part theatre, part religious ceremony, and part mass hallucination. The audience participates by making appropriate noises at dramatic moments, gasps at revelations, cheers at heroic actions, and groans at tragic turns. It's like being part of a medieval laugh track, except instead of comedy, you're responding to stories about people whose lives were even more miserable than yours. If you're feeling particularly social, you might engage in conversation with your fellow castle dwellers. The topics of conversation are limited to the weather, the quality of the food, the health of the livestock, and the various ways people have died recently. It's not exactly stimulating discourse, but it's human interaction, which is valuable when your daily routine involves mostly talking to horses and kitchen utensils. The games available for entertainment include various forms of dice made from actual animal bones, board games carved into wooden planks, and drinking competitions that are less about fun and more about testing your tolerance for medieval alcohol. The dice games involve gambling with things you can't afford to lose. The board games require strategies that no one remembers, and the drinking competitions end with everyone feeling worse than when they started. As the evening progresses, the combination of warm ale, firelight, and collective exhaustion creates an atmosphere of medieval camaraderie. People who spent the day in grinding labour are now sharing stories, laughing at jokes that aren't funny, and participating in activities that aren't entertaining. It's community bonding through shared suffering, and it's surprisingly effective. The evening entertainment is a reminder that humans are social creatures who will create culture and community even in the most challenging circumstances. It's also a reminder that medieval people had very low standards for what constituted fun, which is probably why they managed to survive at all. As the evening entertainment winds down and people begin to contemplate the approaching night, it's time to address one of the most romanticized aspects of medieval life: love, courtship, and relationships. And by romanticized, I mean completely misrepresented by centuries of literature that apparently never met an actual medieval person. If you're single and looking for love in a medieval castle, your options are limited to whoever happens to be within walking distance, which is not many people, and most of them are either related to you, significantly older than you, or currently dying from one of the many diseases that circulate through the castle, like medieval social media. The concept of dating doesn't exist. There are no restaurants to visit, no movies to watch, no coffee shops to meet at. Romance consists of making eye contact across the Great Hall during meals, exchanging meaningful glances while emptying chamber pots, and having conversations about livestock that somehow become intimate through sheer proximity and limited alternatives. If you're interested in someone, you express this interest by sitting slightly closer to them during meals, helping them with their work assignments, and sharing your ale, which is the medieval equivalent of buying someone a drink, except the drink tastes like fermented despair, and the gesture is more about survival than romance. Courtship involves walking together in the castle courtyard, which is a stone-paved area surrounded by walls and populated by horses, chickens, and various other creatures that provide a soundtrack of animal noises to your romantic conversations. You're basically dating in a medieval barnyard, discussing your hopes and dreams, while stepping around manure and trying not to get kicked by livestock. The physical aspects of romance are complicated by the fact that privacy doesn't exist. You're sharing sleeping quarters with multiple people, bathing in communal water, and living in a space where everyone knows everything about everyone else's business. Intimate moments happen in storage rooms, behind curtains, and in alcoves that provide about as much privacy as a medieval confessional. If you're lucky enough to get married, the ceremony takes place in the castle chapel, which is a small stone room that smells like incense and has been used for so many weddings, funerals, and religious services that it's achieved a kind of spiritual mustiness. The wedding feast consists of the same food you eat every day, except there's slightly more of it, and people pretend to be happy about it. The wedding night is spent in the same bed you've been sleeping in, except now you're sharing it with someone else, and everyone in the castle knows exactly what you're supposed to be doing. There's no honeymoon, no romantic getaway, no privacy for the newlyweds. You're starting your married life in the same stone room where you've been living, surrounded by the same people who've been watching you court each other. If you're fortunate enough to have children, they're born in the castle with the assistance of midwives who learned their skills through experience rather than education. The birthing process takes place in the same room where you sleep, using techniques that are part medicine, part superstition, and part hoping for the best. The children who survive infancy, and statistically, about half of them won't, grow up in the castle, learning to work, sleep, and eat in the same conditions that shaped their parents. They're essentially being raised by the entire castle community, which means they're getting parenting advice from people whose primary qualification is that they've managed to survive this long. Family life in a medieval castle is less about nuclear families and more about extended communities of people who are all related by blood, marriage, or the simple fact that they're all trapped in the same stone building together. Children belong to everyone and no one. Parents are responsible for everyone's children, and the concept of personal space is something that won't be invented for another few centuries. Romance in medieval castle life is a reminder that love finds a way, even under the most challenging circumstances. It's also a reminder that when your options are limited and your living conditions are harsh, people become very creative about finding happiness in small moments and shared experiences. The night falls, and couples throughout the castle are beginning their own private dramas of medieval romance, which mostly involve trying to find a quiet corner and hoping that tomorrow's work assignments don't separate them for too long. It's not the stuff of fairy tales, but it's real, and it's human, and it's probably more genuine than anything Hollywood has ever produced. The entertainment is over, the romantic moments have been concluded with all the privacy and comfort that medieval architecture allows, and now it's time for the main event, trying to sleep in a medieval castle, which is like trying to sleep in a stone refrigerator that's been designed by people who had never heard of human comfort. You return to your sleeping chamber, which hasn't improved since this morning. The same rope bed, the same straw mattress, the same wool blanket that weighs more than you do, the same collection of roommates who are all preparing for sleep with the same enthusiasm as people preparing for minor surgery. The temperature in the castle drops significantly once the sun goes down, because stone walls are excellent at retaining cold and terrible at retaining heat. Your chamber becomes a medieval freezer, and your breath starts forming little clouds in the air, like you're exhaling your own personal weather system. The only source of heat is your fellow humans, which means you're huddling together for warmth like medieval penguins. Personal space becomes a luxury you can't afford when the alternative is freezing to death in your sleep. You're essentially participating in a group cuddle for survival, which is both intimate and deeply uncomfortable. The sounds of the castle at night are their own special symphony. The wind howls through the arrow slits, with the enthusiasm of a banshee having an emotional breakdown. The stones creak and settle, like the castle is slowly collapsing around you. Somewhere in the distance, a door is banging repeatedly, creating a rhythm that's just irregular enough to prevent sleep but consistent enough to drive you slowly insane. Your roommates provide their own soundtrack. Someone is snoring like a wounded bear. Someone else is coughing up what sounds like medieval lung disease. And a third person is having a very vivid dream that involves either combat or indigestion. The sound effects are identical. The person next to you is grinding their teeth with the enthusiasm of someone operating a medieval grain mill. The straw in your mattress has shifted during the day, creating lumps in places where lumps shouldn't exist and holes where support should be. You're essentially sleeping on a topographical map of discomfort, trying to find a position that doesn't involve sharp straw poking into your vital organs. The rope bed creaks every time you move, and since you're trying to find a comfortable position, you're creating a percussion section that accompanies the wind, the snoring, and the general acoustic chaos of medieval sleep. Every shift of your body announces itself to the entire room, making rest a very public experience. But here's the real challenge. The castle is haunted, not by ghosts, though the locals will tell you plenty of stories about those, but by the very real spirits of all the people who lived here before you and discovered exactly how impossible it is to get a good night's sleep in a stone fortress. Their restless energy permeates the walls, creating an atmosphere of collective insomnia that spans centuries. The darkness is complete and absolute. There are no streetlights, no digital clocks, no glowing electronics to provide ambient light. When the torches in the hallways burn out, you're plunged into a darkness so total that you can't see your hand in front of your face. It's like being inside a cave, except caves are usually warmer and better ventilated. You lie in your bed, listening to the symphony of medieval night sounds, feeling the cold seep through your inadequate blanket, and contemplating the fact that you have to wake up in a few hours and do this entire routine again. The same bread, the same ale, the same manual labour, the same communal washing, the same everything. Sleep, when it finally comes, is less like rest and more like temporary unconsciousness brought on by exhaustion. You don't fall asleep. You collapse into sleep like a building falling down. Your body simply gives up trying to be comfortable and decides that unconsciousness is preferable to continued awareness of your circumstances. Your dreams are filled with warm beds, hot food, private bathrooms, and other impossible luxuries that your subconscious mind creates to torment you. You dream of showers, of soft pillows, of meals that don't require aggressive chewing, of rooms where you can be alone with your thoughts. These dreams are so vivid that waking up feels like falling out of paradise into purgatory. Morning arrives with all the subtlety of a medieval wake-up call, which is to say someone is banging on something metal with something else metal, creating a sound that penetrates your skull and reminds you that medieval people had not yet invented the snooze button. You've survived another night in the castle, which is actually an achievement worth celebrating, except celebration involves the same food, drink, and general living conditions that made survival challenging in the first place. It's like winning a prize that consists of more of the competition. But let's talk about the real dangers of castle life, because apparently sleeping on straw and eating bread that could be used as building materials aren't exciting enough. The castle is essentially a medieval obstacle course designed to test your reflexes, your balance, and your ability to avoid dying in creative ways. The stairs are carved from stone by people who had apparently never heard of consistency in step height. Each step is a different size, creating a staircase that's part architecture, part booby trap. You're constantly adjusting your stride, catching yourself from falling, and developing the kind of careful walking technique that makes you look like you're perpetually drunk. The floors are slick with moisture that condenses on the stone surfaces, creating a skating rink that no one asked for. Every step is a potential trip to the medieval emergency room, which is to say a trip to whatever passes for medical care in a world where the primary treatment for everything is bloodletting. The doorways are designed for people who are apparently much shorter than modern humans, or possibly for people who enjoyed constantly hitting their heads on stone lintels. You're developing a permanent crouch as you navigate through the castle, and your forehead is accumulating bruises like a collection. The arrow slits that provide ventilation also provide opportunities for birds, bats, and other flying creatures to enter the castle and take up residence. You're sharing your living space with wildlife that has not been house-trained and has very different ideas about appropriate bathroom locations. The wells and water sources are breeding grounds for every waterborne disease that medieval science hasn't discovered yet. The water looks clear, but it's essentially a medieval biological weapons laboratory, teeming with microorganisms that are eager to make your acquaintance through your digestive system. The food storage areas are contested territory between humans and rodents, and the rodents are winning. The rats are so well fed and comfortable that they've basically become unofficial castle residents. They have better accommodations than you do, and they're definitely eating better. The castle's waste management system, which is to say, throwing everything out the windows and hoping for the best, creates a moat of biological hazards around the entire structure. You're living in the centre of a medieval Superfund site, surrounded by centuries of accumulated human and animal waste that's been allowed to ferment in the open air. The livestock that shares the castle with you brings its own set of health and safety challenges. The horses are large, powerful, and have opinions about personal space that they express through strategic kicking. The chickens are territorial and aggressive, the pigs are surprisingly intelligent and hold grudges, and the goats are escape artists who view the entire castle as their personal playground. Fire is a constant threat in a building made of wood, straw, and other materials that burn enthusiastically. The torches, candles, and cooking fires are all open flames in an environment where everything is dry, flammable, and positioned to create maximum property damage. You're essentially living in a medieval tinderbox, surrounded by ignition sources and accelerants. The castle's defensive features, the narrow passages, the hidden rooms, the secret exits, are also excellent ways to get lost, trapped, or accidentally locked in places where no one will think to look for you. The architecture that keeps enemies out also keeps residents confused, and the emergency exits are marked with the medieval equivalent of instructions, which is to say, not marked at all. Weather is amplified by castle living. Rain becomes flooding, wind becomes structural stress testing, and snow becomes an exercise in surviving without adequate heating in a building designed to be cold. You're living in a structure that takes whatever weather is happening outside and makes it worse inside. The social dynamics of castle life create their own hazards. When you're living in close quarters with people who are stressed, tired, malnourished, and armed, conflicts tend to escalate quickly. Disputes over food, sleeping arrangements, work assignments, and personal space can turn violent with medieval efficiency. Your daily survival in the castle requires constant vigilance, quick reflexes, and the kind of situational awareness usually associated with combat zones. You're not just living in a medieval fortress, you're surviving it, one day at a time, one hazard at a time, one near-death experience at a time. Now that you've survived the basic challenges of eating, sleeping, and not dying from the architecture, let's discuss the economic realities of castle life. And by economic realities, I mean the financial system that ensures you'll never have enough of anything you need, while having plenty of things you don't want. Your salary, if you can call it that, is paid in food, shelter, and the theoretical protection of living within castle walls. You're not earning money. Money is for people who have choices, and you definitively do not have choices. You're earning the right to continue existing in a stone building that's slowly killing you through systematic discomfort. The food portion of your compensation consists of the bread and ale we've already discussed, plus whatever additional nutrition the castle can spare, which is usually nothing. You're being paid in carbohydrates and low-grade alcohol, which is probably the most honest employment arrangement in human history. The shelter portion is your shared sleeping space, which comes with roommates, rodents, and the constant threat of structural collapse. You're essentially renting a bed in a medieval hostel, except the hostel is made of stone, there's no checkout time, and the other guests never leave. The protection portion is theoretical, based on the assumption that the castle's walls and guards will keep you safe from external threats. This protection comes at the cost of being trapped inside with internal threats, which include disease, fire, violent roommates, and the food service. Your economic mobility is limited to lateral movements within the castle hierarchy. You can advance from emptying chamber pots to cleaning stables, from cleaning stables to working in the kitchens, from working in the kitchens to serving at table. It's like a career ladder, except every rung is made of the same medieval suffering, just in different flavours. The castle operates on a feudal economy, which means everyone owes something to someone else, in an elaborate pyramid scheme that would make modern scammers weep with admiration. You owe labour to the castle owes protection to you, the lord owes allegiance to the king, and everyone owes their souls to God. It's an economic system based on debt, obligation, and the understanding that everyone is basically trapped in their social position forever. Trade with the outside world consists of whatever merchants are brave enough to visit the castle and crazy enough to think they can make a profit selling goods to people who are paid in bread and theoretical safety. These merchants are essentially medieval travelling salesmen, and they're selling luxury items like soap, spices, and clothing that doesn't smell like livestock. The merchant visits are major social events, not because the merchants are entertaining, but because they represent contact with the outside world and the possibility of acquiring things that might make life marginally more bearable. It's like Christmas, except instead of presents, you get the opportunity to trade your few possessions for slightly better possessions. Your personal wealth consists of whatever you can accumulate beyond basic survival needs, which is usually nothing. Your worldly possessions include the clothes you're wearing, whatever tools you need for work, and possibly a spare shirt if you're incredibly fortunate. You're essentially living in a minimalist lifestyle, except it's not by choice, and it's not Instagram worthy. The concept of savings doesn't exist when your income is paid in perishable food, and your expenses include staying alive. You can't save bread for retirement. It'll either spoil or be eaten by the rats who have a better understanding of compound interest than most medieval people. Investment opportunities are limited to hoping that your work performance will result in better work assignments, which is like investing in a lottery where all the prizes are different types of manual labour. You might advance from cleaning floors to cleaning dishes, which is essentially trading one form of medieval suffering for another. The castle's budget is managed by people who learned accounting from the same education system that produced the medical professionals who think bloodletting cures everything. The financial planning consists of hoping that this year's harvest will be better than last year's disaster, and preparing for famines, wars, and plagues that arrive with medieval punctuality. Your retirement plan consists of working until you physically can't work anymore, at which point you become dependent on the charity of people who are barely surviving themselves. It's a retirement system based on hope, community support, and the statistical likelihood that you'll die before retirement becomes an issue. The economic reality of castle life is that you're participating in a survival-based economy where the primary currency is labour and the primary investment is staying alive long enough to labour tomorrow. It's honest work in the most brutal sense of honesty. You trade your life energy for the basic necessities of existence, and you hope that the trade is worth it. Just when you think you've mastered the art of surviving castle life, the seasons change, and you discover that medieval misery is a year-round experience with exciting seasonal variations. Each season brings its own unique challenges, like a medieval subscription service delivering fresh suffering every 3 months. Winter is the season that tests your will to live. The castle, which was already cold, becomes a stone icebox that makes modern freezers look tropical. The wind howls through every crack and crevice in the stone walls, creating drafts that could freeze water inside your body. You're essentially living in a medieval wind tunnel designed by someone with a deep hatred for human warmth. The only heating comes from fireplaces that consume wood faster than you can gather it, producing smoke that fills the rooms, because medieval chimneys were designed by people who understood neither fire nor airflow. You're constantly choosing between freezing to death and suffocating on smoke, which is like a multiple-choice question where all the answers are wrong. Your winter wardrobe consists of layering every piece of clothing you own, creating an ensemble that makes you look like a walking laundry pile. You're wearing so many layers that you can barely move, but you're still cold because medieval clothing was designed for durability, not insulation. It's like wearing armour made of inadequate fabric. Food becomes even scarcer in winter because nothing grows, nothing can be preserved effectively, and the rats have eaten half of whatever was stored. Your bread becomes harder, your ale becomes flatter, and your soup becomes thinner. It's like your regular diet, except more depressing, which you didn't think was possible. Spring arrives with the promise of improvement, but delivers mostly mud. The snow melts, the rain increases, and the castle transforms into a medieval swamp. The courtyard becomes a bog, the floors become slip hazards, and your shoes become permanently soggy. You're living in a stone house surrounded by primordial ooze. The spring thaw also reveals what's been accumulating under the snow all winter. Months of waste, decomposing organic matter, and dead things that didn't survive the cold. It's like nature's own archaeological dig, except instead of ancient treasures, you're uncovering layers of medieval refuse that have been marinating in ice water. Spring cleaning in a medieval castle means dealing with the accumulated grime, mould, and mysterious stains that developed during the winter months. You're essentially performing an exorcism on the building itself, trying to remove the evil spirits of winter dampness and accumulated filth. Summer brings heat, which sounds like improvement, until you realise that stone buildings retain heat like medieval ovens. The castle becomes a stone greenhouse, trapping hot air and creating conditions that would make modern people immediately call for air conditioning and possibly the fire department. The heat amplifies every smell in the castle, creating an aromatic experience that combines unwashed bodies, decomposing rushes, and cooking food into a fragrant symphony that could knock out a horse. You're living in a medieval terrarium designed to test your olfactory endurance. Summer also brings insects, flies, mosquitoes, fleas, and other creatures that view the castle as an all-you-can-eat buffet featuring human blood as the main course. You're sharing your living space with swarms of tiny vampires that are more persistent than medieval tax collectors. The increased daylight means longer working hours, because medieval people operated on the principle that if you can see, you should be working. Your summer schedule extends from dawn to dusk, which in summer means working approximately 17 hours a day without overtime pay, vacation time, or workers' compensation. Autumn brings the harvest, which sounds positive until you realise that harvest time means working even harder to gather, process, and store food for the winter. It's like a medieval all-hands-on-deck situation, except the deck is covered in mud, and the work involves manual labour that would violate modern employment laws. The autumn weather is unpredictable, cycling between hot and cold, wet and dry, creating conditions that are perfect for getting sick. You're dealing with temperature swings that make your body constantly adjust, weakening your immune system just in time for winter disease season. Preparing for winter involves a level of anxiety that modern people can't comprehend. You're essentially preparing for a siege by nature itself, stockpiling food, fuel, and supplies while knowing that none of it will be adequate. It's like preparing for the apocalypse, except the apocalypse happens every year and lasts for months. Each season in castle life teaches you new ways to be uncomfortable, while reminding you that the previous season's discomfort was actually preferable. It's a year-round education in relative suffering, where every season makes you nostalgic for the previous season's particular brand of misery. The seasonal cycle creates a rhythm of medieval life that's based on endurance, adaptation, and the hope that you'll survive long enough to experience next year's exciting variations in discomfort. It's like being enrolled in a year-long course in advanced suffering, with no graduation ceremony and no degree. Now that you understand the daily realities of castle life, let's examine the social structure that determines exactly how miserable you're allowed to be, and in what style you'll experience your suffering. The medieval castle operates on a strict hierarchy that makes modern corporate structures look egalitarian and flexible. At the top of this pyramid sits the lord of the castle, who enjoys the luxury of sleeping in a room that's only shared with his immediate family and a few servants. His suffering is artisanal. He gets to be miserable in slightly better conditions while being responsible for everyone else's survival. He eats meat occasionally, drinks better ale, and has access to a chair that's marginally more comfortable than sitting on a stone floor. The lord's family occupies the premium tier of medieval suffering. They get to wear clothing that's dyed in colours other than mud brown and resignation grey. They sleep on mattresses that contain actual feathers mixed with the straw, and they have the privilege of being miserable while wearing jewellery. Their daily routine includes making decisions about other people's lives while struggling with the same basic challenges of staying clean, healthy, and fed. Below the family are the household knights who have earned the right to be professional warriors in exchange for room, board, and the constant possibility of violent death. They get to wear armour, which sounds impressive until you realise that medieval armour is like wearing a full-body metal straitjacket that weighs 60 pounds and turns you into a walking oven in summer and a mobile freezer in winter. The knight's primary job is being ready to fight and die for the Lord's interests, which means they spend their days training for combat while living in conditions that would weaken a modern athlete. They're essentially professional fighters who are slowly being worn down by malnutrition, sleep deprivation, and the daily grind of medieval military readiness. Next come the skilled craftsmen, the blacksmith, the carpenter, the cook, who have specialised knowledge that makes them valuable enough to receive slightly better treatment. They get to sleep in marginally less crowded rooms, eat marginally better food, and take pride in their work, while their hands are permanently stained, scarred, and shaped by their crafts. The craftsmen occupy the middle management tier of medieval suffering. They're skilled enough to have some authority over apprentices and labourers, but not important enough to escape the basic realities of castle life. They're like medieval middle managers, except instead of performance reviews, they face the constant threat of starvation, disease, and social demotion. Below them are the general servants, the people who clean, serve, haul, and maintain the castle's daily operations. This is probably where you fit in the hierarchy, which means you've achieved the distinction of being indispensable while remaining completely replaceable. You're valuable enough to keep alive, but not important enough to keep comfortable. The servants exist in a state of functional anonymity, known by their jobs rather than their names. You're the one who empties chamber pots, or the one who scrubs floors, and your identity is tied to your function in the castle's ecosystem. It's like being a medieval cog in a machine, except the machine is designed to process human suffering into basic survival. At the bottom of the hierarchy are the truly expendable workers, the field hands, the stable boys, the kitchen drudges who are too young, too old, or too unskilled to merit better assignments. They experience the purest form of medieval suffering, unfiltered by any privilege or protection. They're the foot soldiers in the war against survival, and they're losing badly. Your position in this hierarchy is essentially permanent. Social mobility exists in theory, but rarely in practice. You might advance from one type of servant to another type of servant, but you're not climbing out of the servant class. It's like a career ladder where all the rungs are at the same height, just painted different colours. The hierarchy determines everything about your daily life: where you sleep, what you eat, whom you can speak to, and how you're expected to behave. It's a social system based on the understanding that everyone has their place, and that place is defined by their usefulness to the people above them in the pyramid. Your relationship with your superiors is based on deference, obedience, and the hope that good service might result in marginally better treatment. You're constantly managing up to people who have the power to make your life slightly less terrible, or significantly more terrible, depending on their mood and your performance. The social rules are complex and unforgiving. You must show proper respect to your betters, which means bowing, using appropriate titles, and never making eye contact unless specifically invited to do so. It's like playing a medieval video game where the rules keep changing and the penalty for mistakes is hunger, punishment, or expulsion from the castle. The hierarchy also creates a weird form of trickle-down suffering, where the lord's bad day becomes the knight's worst day, which becomes the servant's terrible day, which becomes the labourer's catastrophic day. It's a social system designed to distribute misery efficiently throughout the organisation. Your daily interactions are shaped by this structure. You defer to those above you, direct those below you, and compete with those at your level for the limited resources and opportunities available. It's like working in a medieval corporation where the organisational chart is written in stone and the employee handbook is survive or die. The castle hierarchy is ultimately a survival mechanism, a way of organising people and resources to maximise the chances that the essential functions of the castle will continue, even when individuals fail, flee or die. You're not just living in a social system, you're participating in a collective survival strategy that's been tested by centuries of disaster, disease and warfare. We've covered the daily grind of castle life, but let's address the elephant in the room, or rather, the multiple elephants, because death in medieval times came in many forms, all of them unpleasant, and most of them preventable by modern standards. Your life expectancy in a medieval castle is roughly equivalent to that of a modern house cat, except house cats don't have to worry about plague, warfare, or accidentally drinking water that's been contaminated by the castle's waste management system. You're essentially playing a game where the rules are unclear, the odds are against you, and the prize for winning is getting to play again tomorrow. Disease circulates through the castle like medieval social media, fast, constantly changing, and affecting everyone whether they want to participate or not. The closed living quarters, poor sanitation, and limited understanding of hygiene create conditions that are perfect for spreading illness. You're living in a medieval petri dish designed to test the limits of human immune systems. The plague makes regular appearances, arriving like an unwelcome relative who stays too long and leaves destruction in their wake. When plague hits the castle, your survival strategy consists of hoping you're not next while watching your friends, family, and co-workers die in ways that would make modern people immediately call for hazmat suits and professional medical intervention. Dysentery is the steady background threat, the reliable killer that works year-round like a medieval postal service. It's caused by the water supply, the food handling, and the general approach to sanitation that treats clean as a relative concept. You're constantly at risk of dying from the very water and food that you need to survive. Pneumonia strikes during the winter months with the efficiency of a medieval collection agency. The cold, damp conditions in the castle create perfect breeding grounds for respiratory illnesses. You're essentially living in a stone lung that's designed to promote coughing, wheezing, and the slow deterioration of your breathing capacity. Injuries that would be minor inconveniences in modern times become life-threatening emergencies in the castle. A cut from a kitchen knife, a fall down the uneven stone stairs, or a kick from a horse can quickly develop into infections that spread through your body faster than castle gossip. You're living in an environment where every injury is potentially fatal, and every accident is a medical crisis. The medical treatment available for these conditions consists of the bloodletting, purging, and prayer therapy we've already discussed. Your medical options are limited to treatments that are often worse than the diseases they're supposed to cure. It's like having health insurance that only covers procedures designed to make you sicker. Childbirth is particularly dangerous for women, with mortality rates that would horrify modern medical professionals. Giving birth in a medieval castle is like playing Russian roulette, except the gun is loaded with medieval obstetrics, and the odds are worse. Many women die in childbirth, and many children die in infancy, creating a demographic reality where surviving to adulthood is an achievement worth celebrating. Mental illness is treated as demonic possession, moral weakness, or divine punishment, depending on how the symptoms manifest. The understanding of psychology is limited to crazy people are crazy, and the treatment options include beatings, imprisonment, or exile. You're living in a society that views depression as a character flaw and anxiety as spiritual weakness. Food poisoning is a regular occurrence because food preservation techniques are limited to salting, smoking, and hoping for the best. The storage conditions for food would violate every modern health code, and the concept of expiration dates doesn't exist. You're constantly eating food that might be fine or might kill you, and you won't know which until after you've digested it. Accidents are common in a castle environment, filled with open flames, sharp tools, dangerous animals, and architectural features designed to injure people. You're working with equipment that would be banned by modern safety regulations in conditions that would close down any modern workplace. Every day is an occupational safety nightmare waiting to happen. The mortality rate means that death is a constant presence in castle life. You're regularly attending funerals, grieving for people who died young, and contemplating your own mortality while trying to focus on daily survival. It's like living in a perpetual state of grief while maintaining the energy needed for manual labour. Your approach to death becomes philosophical out of necessity. You're forced to accept mortality as a daily reality rather than a distant possibility. The medieval understanding of death is practical, spiritual, and immediate. Death is always present, always possible, and always final. The castle maintains a cemetery that's constantly expanding, filled with people who lived lives similar to yours and died from causes that you face every day. It's a sobering reminder that your daily survival is not guaranteed and that the conditions you're enduring have been literally killing people for generations. Yet despite these overwhelming odds, people continue to live, work, love, and hope within the castle walls. It's a testament to human resilience that communities can thrive even under conditions that would be considered uninhabitable by modern standards. You're not just surviving castle life, you're participating in a demonstration of human endurance that spans centuries. So there you have it, life in a medieval castle, stripped of the Hollywood glamour and revealed in all its gritty, uncomfortable, occasionally death-defying reality. You've survived a day, a night, and glimpsed the seasonal cycles of medieval existence. You've experienced the hierarchy, the economy, the romance, and the ever-present threat of creative ways to die. As you settle into sleep tonight, in your climate-controlled bedroom, on your comfortable mattress, surrounded by the conveniences that medieval people could never have imagined, take a moment to appreciate how far we've come. Your worst day is probably better than the best day in a medieval castle, and your daily irritations would seem like luxurious problems to someone living on bread, ale, and hope. The people who lived in these castles weren't heroes or villains. They were humans dealing with circumstances that tested every aspect of their physical, mental, and spiritual endurance. They worked, loved, laughed, and died in conditions that would challenge the strongest modern person, and they did it without complaint, because complaining was a luxury they couldn't afford. Their legacy isn't the romanticized version of medieval life that appears in movies and books. Their legacy is the simple fact that they endured, that they built communities and families and traditions under the most challenging circumstances imaginable. They proved that humans can adapt to almost anything and find meaning, purpose, and even joy in the darkest times. Tonight, as you drift off to sleep in comfort that would seem miraculous to a medieval person, remember that you're the descendant of people who survived castle life, plague years, famines, and wars. You carry their resilience in your DNA, their adaptability in your genes, and their stubborn refusal to surrender in your spirit. The next time you complain about your Wi-Fi being slow, your coffee being cold, or your commute being annoying, remember the people who lived entire lives without any of these concepts existing. They managed to find happiness in shared meals of bread and ale, in stories told by firelight, in the simple warmth of human companionship during cold stone nights. Sweet dreams, and remember, tomorrow you get to wake up in the 21st century, where the greatest dangers you'll face are probably traffic, deadlines, and deciding what to watch on streaming services. Life is good, even when it doesn't feel like it. Sleep well, my fellow time travelers. You've earned your rest in ways that medieval people could only dream of.